I am delighted to be chatting today to Roman Dibden, the CEO of the youth employment charity RISEUP, based up in Manchester. RISEUP are a groundbreaking organisation that launched in 2019 to tackle the growing crisis of young people not in employment, education or training, or NEET for short, for those of you that have heard the term already. And this is a problem that is getting worse and worse. The number of young people who are in a NEET situation has risen by 23% in the last 2 years. So what RISEUP are doing is desperately needed and incredibly important. What they are doing is taking action to reverse this trend by coaching and mentoring young people to conduct their own job search, facilitating jobs and apprenticeships and work experience placements alongside that. And their results are speaking for themselves. Since its inception, RISEUP has offered over 800 hours of one-to-one coaching and facilitated 89 impactful work placements so far, and supported an incredible 818 young people towards a better and a brighter future. They are fundamentally getting young people into great jobs. Roman, who has just passed, congratulations, his first year anniversary at RISEUP, is here today, and he himself has got quite a lot of experience of the challenges around getting into a good job and what it's like when you don't necessarily have the kind of traditionally seen as the kind of right qualifications, in inverted commas, having left school at 14 himself. But Roman, I am now delighted to have the chance to talk to you about the challenges you're facing, what you're solving and the kind of needs. But I'd love to start by getting you to tell us a little bit about from your perspective, what you see the challenges are. I mean, obviously I've given a very broad overview there, but why is it that young people the 23% rise has happened in young people, in your view?
Yeah, thanks for the great introduction there, Mary. It's almost feels difficult to follow on from that, but no, obviously we hear a lot about NEET and young people being unemployed. The figure at the moment is almost 1 million young people are unemployed, and I'm often invited to kind of comment on exactly why that is. And I think sometimes we could look at, the job centres or DWP or the advice that the young people are receiving there, but fundamentally, I firmly believe that we all play a part. Us as the charity sector could do more, business leaders could do more, absolutely the job centres could do more and make young people feel more supported. But it's quite a vicious cycle because, in order to qualify for benefits, young people are being forced to apply for up to 35 hours of job search activity, which means they're scattergun approaching job applications. Employers are frustrated, which means they're rejecting and providing less feedback. And naturally, as a young person, if you've received, 150, 200 rejection emails, you don't really feel good in yourself and you start to question your own worth. So, I think that's a lot to do with it, is that kind of lack of direction, that hand holding and that time and space that they need. The job centres, we obviously now work closely with a lot of the job centres on the process, but for a long period of time, it has been more about being a monitor and exercise, and they'll have sort of 10 minutes with one of their caseload, which simply isn't enough, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's no real support to anybody. How much do you think that because there's a massive rise in digital recruitment, and I mean, particularly, I think it's one of the sort of, often these things have supposedly been leveling the playing field by doing things digitally and, not meeting people personally, so you can't be biased and all that sort of stuff. But how much do you think that is also playing into this lack of morale? Because, it must be pretty tough if you are doing digital job adverts, you're never actually meeting a person, and sometimes even I've heard of people having to do digital interviews where they are kind of interviewed by AI. Do you think that is playing a part, or?
To take it a step back than that, we work closely with Manchester Tech Festival. We're one of the charity partners that we announced last year, and we bring all of these great tech employers together in the city. You go 15 minutes outside of city centre Manchester, an area like Collyhurst, and a number of the young people don't have access to laptops or digital subscriptions to get onto the internet. So I think that as a starting point is a big problem. In terms of the digital process, we see it a lot, especially in areas like financial services. And you're doing an assessment center that's not with a person, that's pre-recorded. And actually, this notion of, I think we've got to ask the question, why do we do assessment centers? And often when I speak with hiring managers, that is my challenge. We can coin the phrase, harnessing disruptive talent, which sounds really good and really inclusive. But actually, if you're following the same kind of process for certain groups of young people, I sit on a neurodiversity group, and quite honestly, a number of the young people from those backgrounds just are not able to excel in a big group assessment center environment, but actually they possess the right kind of skills, arguably more skills, to really thrive in the workplace. We've got to look at those alternative pathways that we can show off talent.
Yeah. From your perspective, what exactly is it? Can you give us a bit more detail about what RISEUP does and how you do it? And give us some examples of people that you're working with, so it kind of really brings it to life, how the mentoring and how the employability programs are working.
Absolutely. And I think it's, when I'm asked that question, I think of a lot of young people. I'm trying to think of one to give a case and example, but really we're geared up to meet people at face value. There isn't a one size fits all model. The way that I view things is, if we have as many different perspectives as possible, that can add as much value as possible, if you like. So I guess that the way that we work is we leverage employer partners to utilize volunteer hours to mentor some of our young people and kind of make that as easy as possible for them. And then we do a bit of a matching exercise. So we know that, for example, we've got a significant number of volunteers in the digital tech sector. If we have a particular young person that's expressed an interest in following that pathway, then we know the right kind of, there's obviously a lot more to it than that in terms of getting to know the mentor and the mentee, and that matching exercise is crucial. But then they actually understand the sector a little bit more and can give that insight. But actually, it's about making the young person feel valued. I remember there's a chap who messaged me actually yesterday on the back of an article that I'd wrote about the UK being the least work-orientated country in the world, as Brewdog CEO has said. But he was someone that's a care experienced young man. He was working with the job centres, and he openly said before he came into contact with RISEUP, he'd made 200 job applications and heard nothing back. And his mental health had taken a turn for the worse. He just didn't really know where to go at all. And then he came into contact with us, and we started to unpick, who he is, what does he want to do, what is his kind of value set, and we do different exercises with young people. We work on things like, the softer skills, which are often lacking, and the confidence, and even as simple as, what is your elevator pitch? How would you kind of describe yourself, kind of thing? And the key to what we do is, not only when we place a young person, often that's kind of it. You put them into the job and we've done our thing, and that's great, and it looks fantastic. But actually, we continue working with them. On average, we say it's 6 months. I know there's a lot of charities in the room here. You can never switch off people. So often we hear, years down the line from them, but we continue providing that one-to-one support. And we also try and, when it's harder to control when it's a vacancy that's already out there, but we also work directly with employers on actually, where are your skills shortages? Can you create a internship, or can you create an actual job apprenticeship, and that kind of pathway? In those scenarios, we have a lot more control to include the line manager in our conversations, because often when you work with a young person that's been through significant hurdles, a care leaver, for example, when something goes on in their personal life, they don't know how to articulate that with a hiring manager. Then when an employer, a member of staff doesn't rock up, they'll try and follow the HR line, and we try and be that kind of go-between to sustain the outcome.
But basically, the trusted person is so important in that situation. Yeah, because if the young person trusts you, they can tell you what the real reason was that they may not have been able to show up. And then, yeah, it's really interesting that you say that, because we have backed a number of charities working in the homeless sector, and there's very similar issues about getting people who've experienced homelessness, not surprisingly, into work. And, there are things that go on in their personal life that they just, because the system has let them down so many times, why would they risk telling their employer what's really going on, when actually it's something that can be quite easily solved and sorted if
Exactly.
you've got support. Yeah. One of the sort of unpleasant issues that is going on around is that there's a lot of conversation in certain parts of the media, particularly around, it's because people don't want jobs. What's your, I know you disagree with that completely, but tell us a bit more about that.
I mean, we'd all be concerned if I said yes, I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
So, no, absolutely. It really frustrates me, because day in, day out, I speak to young people that categorically the system, the way it's geared up, is failing them. They have an appetite to work. They are doing the hard miles. They are applying for vacancies. They are very passionate. But when they're hearing nothing back, they feel let down. And arguably, the recruitment processes at the moment are completely flawed. I won't pick on a sector, but I sit on different working groups, and I remember being invited.
Go on, give us some sectors. You don't need to name business names, but just it's really useful to know, because we're also talking to people in different sectors all the time.
I won't name drop, but I come from a social housing background, so I was brought up in social housing. When I lost my mum, my first apprenticeship was in the housing sector as well. And now I sit on a working group to try and encourage more tenants to be directly employed by social housing landlords, because I think it's a really great sector. I can't speak highly enough about it. One of my frustrations with it is they have some fantastic apprenticeship vacancies down their supply chain. You, as much as everyone in the room probably knows, some of the trade apprenticeship vacancies are highly competitive. Now, I remember sitting with a series of leaders, and they were almost peacocking that, well, my apprenticeship scheme gets 1,000 applicants, and my apprenticeship scheme gets 1,500 applicants for one or two vacancies, whatever it may be. And I was like, well, fantastic, your marketing's on point there, you're getting the brand out there. I said, but what are you doing with the young people that are rejected? Because you've got the hopes up, they follow the process, and then you send them a blanket rejection. And I think that is what we really need to hone down on. And personally, that's my mission. We can fly the flag for disruptive talent, and we can use great stories, but actually, pragmatically, how do we be part of that solution? And how do we, cross-refer? How do us as RISEUP work with others in the charity space? How can we support other charities to thrive? And I think we've got to collaborate more.
Yeah. And because ultimately from the businesses, the problem, I suppose, in some ways there is technology is a bit of fault, in that they've probably got brilliant IT solutions that mean they don't have extra work. Whereas 20 years ago, having 1,500 applications would be a nightmare, because you have to read all the CVs. Now it's all done. So they're like, yeah, no, it's great, we can show off about it. But actually, it'd be just as good having 20 really good ones of people who are really fitted. Then, that's so interesting. I'll feed that back if I ever meet anyone from those sorts of sectors. But tell us a bit more, if you're happy to, about your background and why, your experiences and how the sort of system didn't support you, and what has really motivated you to take on a role like this.
Yeah, gosh, where to start? Probably the headline, obviously, kind of probably atypical to a lot of the young people that we work with, but my parents split up when I was quite young. I opted to live with my mum. Unfortunately, I think it was like the day before my 13th birthday, she was diagnosed with leukemia, which I didn't know what it meant, but I was Googling it and obviously realised the extent of that. And I was just kind of being a bit of a jack the lad, skipping school. I was going to the consultant's appointments with her, and I think in the end, my attendance got to like 23%, which I've probably spent the past 12 years now working with educators. So I understand that you can't really keep someone on roll with 23% attendance. But in that moment, I felt that the schooling system didn't really take the time to understand why my attendance was so poor. Just thought, I'm being a little toe rag. He doesn't want to be here. So why would we keep him here, sort of thing? And so I ended up getting excluded from school at 14. And I basically did nothing. And at first I thought this was fantastic. I didn't really like school and the classroom. I can play a lot of Call of Duty and PlayStation, etc. But I very quickly got bored. And I was quite embedded in kind of my local community in like South Manchester. And I worked with a fantastic arts organisation called Z Arts, and we were running like music workshops and things like that. And that was keeping me occupied to kind of get me through. And then for my final 6 months of school, my mum was like, listen, you need to get your GCSEs under your belt, Roman, because, whether you like it or not, that's going to open a lot more doors for you. So actually, can you please like knuckle down? So I went to a pupil referral unit, and I always say that with a smile. And I care a lot about the Prues, obviously being to one, but it's a very challenging environment, putting all of the naughty kids together with limited resources isn't kind of great. But yeah, lo and behold, managed to get my GCSEs under my belt. But unfortunately, in that period, my mum had passed away, so I was kind of a little bit. I wasn't really interested in work and careers. What I would say is, whilst I was in the Pru, which is the irony of working with an arts centre, but I hated my double arts lesson that was on a Monday morning, and we had a connections careers advisor that was downstairs in the building. So I was probably one of the only students in the Pru that would go and see her every Monday. Without fail, I'd go and see her, and we'd have tea, and we'd have biscuits, and she'd think I was really driven about my next steps. I just hated the double art lesson at that point. But Linda, bless her, she after I'd left, probably about 8 months later, which is like the period that I'd spent doing nothing, to be honest. She just emailed me like, Roman, please don't delete this. I promise it'll be right up your street. And it was an apprenticeship in housing. And I wasn't going to go. And then I applied. And I remember hiding in the Subway sandwich shop because I was nervous to go in for the interview, and I was going to lie to my older sister and say it's all failed. But suddenly I connected with the hiring manager and never really looked back, and was an apprentice for like 6 months, and then worked in supported housing, so people with drug addiction, mental health and things like that, and then became an apprentice ambassador, worked for an apprentice training provider, going into schools and delivering talks. And then before I took over RISEUP, I was helping to run a work experience and careers provider. So we were working with schools and colleges, well, in the end, nationally, and we had some pockets of work in Australia. And November, a year ago, if you like, what was it, 2023? I was just at a bit of a crossroads. I'd worked up to being the chief commercial officer there, and it was great, and the business had scaled, and I had great staff around me, and it was just like, I've got this itch. I actually want to be directly related to a cause and a cause that I care about, and I feel I can be doing more to change things up. So it was like, do I wait till years down the line to jump into the charity sector, or do I actually, now I'm in a lucky position, and I think that's something as RISEUP and we want to help other charities look at, is what are those entry routes in? Because often for individuals and young people in particular that go into the sector, I think, there could be better conditions, but equally the hardship with that is the way we are with grants and funding and how, unstable it is in the market. But I spoke to a few charities, and RISEUP kind of jumped out at me just because I'm supporting kids like who I was, I guess. So it was like a full circle moment. And yeah, like you said, it was my year anniversary on Wednesday, so I had a nice cake and a balloon to celebrate, really.
I mean, they're incredibly lucky to have found you. It sounds to me. But what do you think are the things, the really easy wins in the system for starters? I mean, obviously they're going to be, and what are the harder ones, but things that could be changed easily if you had the chance to sit down with, I don't know who the new minister is in charge of young people and working and pensions division, but where do you think they could make some small, short, sharp changes that would actually help.
I
And
think, yeah, I think just on that point, I'm starting to. So I had an interview on LBC, probably a few. I've had a few interviews on there, but a few months ago I had an interview on LBC, and it was no, it might have been December. It was just in and around time they announced this Get Britain Working white paper,
mm,
which, in theory, is a step in the right direction. I'm sure,
mm,
like many charity leaders of small charities, there's concerns there of, well, will the big guys just take all the money and then
yeah,
we'll be left with nothing? But I think my calls is around how government can leverage the voluntary sector and make sure that they are, us as grassroots organisations are on the ground doing some fantastic work and are
yeah,
often overlooked. The DWP
yeah,
will put the money into the job centres and that's kind of it. And we're just
yeah,
chasing little pots of grant money to do that. So I think the key is how can you get feedback and leverage and collaborate with the voluntary sector. That's got to be the start of all of this. And then from there we can start to build, more collaboration and innovative approaches with it.
yeah. It's something that we are like increasingly seeing when I mean, we are a small charity ourselves. So, as with everybody, it's a capacity, but looking at how can we think about leveraging all of the incredible social entrepreneurs that we know and we know have such amazing solutions like you and RISEUP to get you talking into the right places and people who have actually, they need to know that there are answers out there because it is so frustrating that over and over again they'll do things like government will go, oh, let's just put more money into the job centres and give the job centres more money to hire more people so the appointments can be 15 minutes long, not 10 minutes. But that's not, as you're showing, not surprisingly, young people need a much more they need longevity in the support like anybody would need. And it needs to be more wraparound, but trying to get that knowledge and information that you have into the people that are in charge of decision making, I think it could be something that will make a difference. So we'll try and help you with that, Roman, where we can. But we can't promise them anything fast. But in terms of what you're doing, like there's a huge, I can imagine, and I think you're seeing there's much broader impact in the wider community. But tell us some stories about where you see the knock-on benefit in that it's not just about helping one individual. If you get one individual into work, that individual, like what sorts of ripple effects do you see with what you're doing?
I think a lot of when we speak to young people and we try and get as much feedback as possible in terms of shaping our provision, that, often they feel there isn't kind of role models for them. And our mentoring program tries to help that. And this is something I'm quite conscious of. So I as part of the Manchester Tech Festival, I did a talk at the Leaders Day. And it was great. There's a lot of C-suite people that then heard about RiseUp and want to get involved. But to some young people, even looking back at me, if I was 14 and I had the opportunity to speak to a CTO, I probably wouldn't appreciate it as much as when I took those initial steps. And then I'd probably really appreciate that conversation. So we're trying to build a peer mentoring model through some of our former participants as well, just so that they can kind of come back and share their stories and build on it. And, it makes it a little bit more real for some of the young people. And even with the program delivery, when we do like these little short employability programs, and we try and build like panel events as part of that, so there's a range of perspectives being delivered to young people. So I think obviously the ripple effect is if we get more young people into work, and we can support them to thrive, naturally they remember where they come from. And I guess that's a lot of my drive, is ultimately for every single one of us, whether you're a little toe rag like me, or whether you've actually progressed in a career area, at some point somebody's given you an opportunity, and I think we've got to remember who that person is, and then why wouldn't you want to be that for someone else?
Yeah, the strength of the peer network, mentoring and networking, I think is really underestimated. Because when you're 14 or you're 15, hearing from somebody who's 30 it's so far away. I mean, they're just really old, basically,
Yeah.
let alone as old as me. But if you hear from someone who's 17 saying, "Oh, actually, I did this," I can imagine that is actually, it has a huge impact on people in a way that a 17-year-old might not think that they've got that
Yeah.
much to offer, but actually, yeah, they're very influential. Um, do you think that with what you're doing, and what do you think of the like three crucial keys to your success in terms of what RiseUp does?
Gosh, that's very difficult to narrow it down. I think,
Or five or 10. What
I
other,
think
yeah.
I think the fundamental is kind of making sure there's that financial security in terms of a diverse income stream is the absolute challenge, and what
Yeah.
every charity wants to look at. We're probably, I would say, and I was speaking to Rob in the pre to this, but I would like to get to a point where we're kind of 75% corporately funded with 25% on grants. I think we're going in the right direction. I think it was probably around the 55-60% mark last year.
Really good.
So we obviously are looking at that strategy around engaging with employers and how they can contribute to what we're doing as part of their social value, just to kind of give us that less of a panic when we are chasing the grant funding.
Yeah.
I think capacity is naturally a challenge, but I'd say we had a really impressive year last year, and I feel incredibly blessed around that. But if it wasn't for the four, you guys obviously funded us and enabled us to create an additional youth worker post, which then freed me up to look at partnerships and things like that, then it wouldn't have been possible. I think outside of kind of the financial stability, it's about how do we better engage with young people and make sure that we've got youth voice. So, this is now, I can't just say this is my first year because we've just passed the year birthday, but this is the first time I've ever been in the charity sector. So obviously looking at the relationship with my board, for example, and I'm incredibly lucky. My board give me a lot of freedoms, but one of my challenges when I kind of walked through the doors was like, okay, let's do a realistic skills analysis on us as a board. So what can I bring to the table? What do you guys bring to the table? And where are the gaps? And that's difficult because you've got, business leaders that probably sometimes don't want to admit their weaknesses, but that exercise created an additional board member post in marketing. I feel that whilst I'm just about within the beneficiaries age that we support, I won't go too much into my age, but I was concerned when you were saying 30s old, Mary there. I think we're currently recruiting. It closes at the end of the month for a youth representative on our main board, and then within the next couple of months, we're going to have a youth a youth board as well to shape our design of programs. So I think just trying to balance all of the moving parts has been the biggest challenge in the sector so far. But I think the knock-on effect of creating that youth worker post, that actually we've just and she'll start with us on the start of Feb, created like a head of programs and design to specifically look at the QA measures. The nice story about all of that is it was when I talk about I walked into that interview and connected with someone 15, 16 years ago. So my first boss is coming in and working for us, and she's done great work designing programs and working with employers and all this stuff. So yes, it's going to be fantastic. So it's a full circle moment.
That is very, very cool. That is awesome. And with what you're doing, tell us a little bit more about your corporate partnership model and how that works. What do you give your corporate partners? What do you charge? I mean, if you're happy to say kind of how do you charge them? You don't need to say what you charge them, but how does it work?
I think so. There's two ways. So the kind of when I first started, I was like, let's create a menu and let's keep it quite fixed, and we'll send out this corporate brochure, and that'll be the way to do it, because ultimately in the private sector you'd kind of have that, or you'd have a range. I just lead by conversations really, and let's find out what the pain points are from a from an employer. And often a lot of our model relies on volunteering, which is great. And actually, the biggest waste at the moment in the corporate world is a lot of the big corporates allocate their staff 2, 3+ days volunteering, and they go unused.
Mm.
Or the other side of that is they'll just go and paint a fence, which fine, I agree, the fence needs painting, but actually you could turn that business up or turn them on more around a cause that matters to them and it's close to their kind of brand values. So we try and go down that road with them and say, well, look, there's a lot of opportunities to get involved. It's great as part of your social value. Obviously, youth unemployment is a hot topic for a lot of people because whether you are on the side like me of actually these young people had a lot of value and we should be creating positive futures, or whether you're more on the financial side, the reality is stark. I think they estimate that if we reduce unemployment to the same rate as the Netherlands, it'll create an additional 69 billion in GDP. So, there's two angles there, but I think, a lot of businesses as part of their ESG strategy will be looking at how they can engage more with the voluntary sector. So I just look at that.
Do you, at the moment, how regionally specific are you? Like where are the businesses based that you're working with? Are they all based in Manchester? How broad do you go?
No, so we can cover anywhere, and we get kind of. I wanted to focus just on Greater Manchester, to be honest with you, in the first instance to get it right. But then when you start to do more, people will find out about you, and then you'll kind of, someone will write to you from Birmingham, or someone will write to you from Dorset or wherever it may be. So we can provide a lot of virtual support to young people. At the moment, the bulk of our corporates are in kind of the Manchester region, London, and then we've just started doing a pocket of work in Thanet in Kent, which is really obscure, but we've picked that as a pilot as well.
That's quite a long way on the other side of the country to have pictures and pilot.
Yes, yeah, but the reason being is the part of the corporate relationship. So the way that we work is there's naturally the day-to-day of what we do, but it's also creating that bit of talent pipeline for a young person. So we try and say, well, look, downstream, you want to improve your apprenticeship program, you want to be recognized around that. Let us support you on that journey, and what better way than actually being able to create a bespoke pathway into what you need later down the line, which will also bypass the need for the assessment centre because we're working so far in advance with that young person. We can get them to where they need to be.
There are a lot of people on this call, and I know lots of them will have some questions. So I don't want to take up all of your time with my questions. I have got a couple more that I really want to ask you, but I just want to open it out. Is there anyone would like to, please do come on camera and ask it live as opposed to putting it in the chat. But is there anyone who'd like to have got a burning question? Ewan has asked, how do the young people that you support come to you? Are they always willing participants? How do you successfully engage them and maintain that engagement? That's a great question, Ewan.
Yes, I'll probably start with the second part and then work in from there. Then they're not always willing participants. I think sometimes it's a downstream approach. So we could engage, with youth clubs or facilities or even some of the street youth teams that are operating locally to us. And we'd meet a young person and they won't be willing to engage, but we let them know who we are and that we're there, and we try and keep them warm in terms of communicating with that youth club and centre. What we found last year that, we could potentially meet someone in, I'm trying to think of a live example. Yeah, this young lad, I obviously can't say his name, but we met him in the March period. And he was kind of, local services were saying he's going to get into trouble. He's already kind of got involvement going on, and he's going to end up in the wrong side. I was like, oh, God, what do we do? And we're trying to let him know that we're there for him and things like that. And we did a partnership with UK Youth and RSA Insurance to deliver an employability program. And as part of that, the participants could get a scholarship of £750. And I think he'd obviously looked at it and thought, oh, 750 quid, that's great. I'm going to go there and I'm going to get this money. And he came, and that was March first engagement. He came to the August program. So there was already a period of time before he properly engaged with us. And I remember he sat at the front and he buddied up with this other cheeky chappie as well. And we're thinking, wow, they're going to cause a right chaos here. But they got on well and it was great. And then we were like, well, what do you want to do? You know, because you're going to have to think about this for the scholarship. And he's like, look, really want to be a scaffolder. And we put him forward for this scaffolding apprenticeship a week after the program had finished. And he rang me up, he was like, oh, I've been offered it, Roman. I've been offered it. It's great. I've got this. I said, oh, well done. How are you finding it, stuff? And I said, just remember the scholarship deadline, you know, is coming up at the end of the month. And he went, I'm not going to apply for it. I said, well, you can apply for this, you know, you probably get it, sort of thing. And he went, I don't want to take away from another young person because I know that there's not an unlimited amount of scholarships. And it was just like, that's why you kind of do it. So yeah, it's not always plain sailing. You know, obviously sometimes young people are referred that have just been made redundant or that have possessed all the skills, they just need pointing in the right direction. In terms of the referral streams, sometimes young people, it's word of mouth or they come onto our website, but we do a lot of outreach with other charities and other community partners just to kind of understand who's on their caseload and get them to refer across. Hopefully that's answered it.
I think so. We've got a kind of follow-up, very related question to that from Charlie at Autistic Girls Network. She's asking how we, as in Autistic Girls Network, can encourage more neurodiverse professionals to mentor and support neurodiverse candidates, and asking if there's a way to cooperate or to help you.
Yes, it's a question. It's a fitting question. Why I'm saying, I think, you know, neurodiversity is spoken about a lot more now in the workplace, and it's fantastic because I think it should be spoken about more. And I'm glad that people have got the space to talk about kind of what used to be seen as a weakness in some regards. You know, I'm someone that suffers with ADHD, and I've had to adapt kind of my working patterns. Danny on our team has got ADHD and autism. She won't mind me saying that. And, you know, it's just about learning how we work best in and around that. And a lot of the work that I'm doing as part of the neurodiversity network in Manchester is we do have a lot of the big employers as part of that. You know, we've got the likes of Auto Trader and BBC and Talk that sit round table and kind of share best practice on, you know, what they're doing in their workplaces to make it more inclusive. What are the best practice events? And the piece of work that we're going through at the moment's actually created 2 work experience opportunities for some local young people with neurodiversity to start pulling together these resources and, you know, making it accessible in that sense. I think what I would say is it's about kind of, you know, when we get a referral, is like looking at them as face value and how they would best navigate. You know, sometimes, you know, you'd argue, I'm trying to think, a young man with autism might not excel in that traditional pathway, but actually, I tell you what, if you put him in a work placement, he will stand out 1,000,000% and show his worth to that employer. And it's about actually, let's just get the employer to open the door. We're just asking them for a work placement, but actually when you get a really good person on work placement, you want to keep them on because it's so hard to find good staff.
How do you find staff for yourselves? Because I can't remember how big your team is. How big is your team?
We're relatively small, so we've got 4 staff members in terms of permanent on payroll, and then we've got about 20 volunteers that support us as well.
And yeah, do you find it hard to find really good team members? I mean, it's the charity sector, so none of us can pay particularly high salaries. It's not easy.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I've tried to, and the way that I've looked at RISEUP is probably trying to break the norms of what we are, I guess, you know, and try to create it more as a movement. It's not, it's not about me as the leader, or it's not about the staff we have. It's about working towards this common goal of tackling the youth unemployment crisis. So naturally within that, I feel lucky that last year, I think we did like 20 different media appearances, and we were asked to commentate quite a lot on the problem statement. And I think the more that you do those kind of things and get more noticed for that, the more awareness of the brand there is. And often I've had it, and I won't quote the corporates, but where I've gone and delivered a talk to staff, and like on the back of it, they're getting in touch on our website asking about vacancies or how things like that. So it's not part of the strategy to poach staff from our corporate partners, but I think it's, it's about showing what's possible, and the benefits of working in this sector is, yes, it's challenging, and there's probably a lot of leaders on this call that, our job in the private sector would be very different to what we're doing here when we're unjamming the printer or, every other thing that we have to do. But actually, you'll never feel more fulfilled anywhere else. And I think that's what we've got to, that sense of satisfaction of actually we're changing lives, no matter what the cause is. I think that can help sell it to people.
That is a really, really good point. One last question from Kathy Wassell asking, how eager have you found employers to create supported internships and apprenticeships?
Eager is probably the wrong term there, Kathy. I think it's about putting them in a position where they've kind of got to do that. It's easy to play lip service as an employer to say, we are inclusive and we care about young talent and things like that. It's about actually making it easy for them to help and putting it into bite-sized chunks. And that's what we've tried to do. We're under no illusions. If I go to an employer and say, I want you to hire one of our young people at, whatever it may be, 18, 20K sort of salary range, they'd probably say no at first. But if I say, well, why don't you come and do a talk for me? Why don't you just give an hour of your time, volunteer one of your staff members, then they go back and they're buzzing about it. And then it kind of ripple effects from there. So corporate partnerships aren't the quick fix. I'd love to be able to say, I'd walk into Boots tomorrow and they're going to give us a load of money and it's one meeting and that's it. Often the big corporate partnerships take 6 to 12 months to actually land, but the reward of that is great. I mean, obviously the smaller ones, it's probably a month's work, and I think sometimes it's hard. But actually, I would say that sometimes there's more they can offer than just financial benefits. And I think the four are great at this as well. The pro bono network, I'm tapped into that and I'm receiving mentoring, and I've found that kind of really beneficial. So there is more they can do.
That's interesting though that you say that about the corporates, because we have, some of our corporate partnerships took us 2 years of hard kind of just like regular contact and getting to know them before they actually came off the ground. And then others happen really quickly. But the going in with volunteering, going in with offering rather than asking is often, because this is helpfully answering Louise's question from Strength and Learning. But I think that offer of saying, oh, do you need some volunteering? It is a great way, isn't it, to get to know a corporate, and then they can sort of sell you in themselves, because that's when it really works, is when you got inside ambassadors, or certainly from us. Do you find that as well, Roman?
That just having someone on the inside and being part of the right kind of circles, for us, the tech sector's of interest. There's a lot of young people involved in that, and obviously it was great that we became a charity partner of Manchester Tech Festival, and that gave us a platform to then speak with other businesses and kind of share the story in the background and how incredible some of the young people are, and actually just to start to drip feed it from there. Hopefully will pay dividends, really.
Roman, it's 1:45. So as a final question, can I ask you, how can we help? Is there anything that you'd like to shout out for? What are you looking for? What do you need?
To be honest, I think it's just continuing the conversation. I enjoy speaking with other charity leaders and finding out what's going on in the space. And I think just creating spaces where we can have those conversations. I mean, I got to go to one of the four charity dinners, which was fantastic to meet. I think there's four other charity leaders with me as well, and learn about what they're up to. So I think just having more conversations, I think that's so important for our space at the moment.
Okay, everyone, please do get in touch with Roman, either come through us or I mean, I'm assuming, Roman, you're quite active on LinkedIn because I've seen you post quite a lot. So please do get in touch with him. He's keen to talk to you. We're also obviously here too and keen to talk to people. So do get in touch via us as well. We have some lovely comments in the chat coming in about what a fantastic job you're doing and how inspiring you are, Roman. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that everybody has been as inspired by what you're doing as we are, and it's hard work, but you're doing a brilliant job. So congratulations and have a lovely weekend, everyone. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks, everyone.